Of course, you can learn this, and we're going to work on it until you do. Welcome to the Homeschool Paradigm Podcast. I'm Angela, and I wanted to talk about how we can tell if our kids are progressing. I think that we think progress should look like a straight line up. And sometimes when our kids look like they're going backwards, we don't realize that maybe they're just trying to find a new way to apply the knowledge, or, hasn't stuck in their brain yet. Sometimes it's just as simple as that. But like when we're teaching something and we move on to the next step, they need more support than they needed. Let's say you've taught them nouns and they really have a good grasp of what a noun is, and then you're going to move on to teaching them what a verb is. They might get confused and you think, oh no, they know what a noun is. How can they be getting nouns and verbs confused? But it's just because you're adding something more in, and now they're looking at two different things, and they have to get it sorted out in their head, and they need a little bit more support. So they had gotten to where they didn't need any support for nouns, and now that you've introduced verbs, it's like they need more support for nouns again. And so that's perfectly normal when you add something in to go back to needing more support. We all are that way. We all do that with anything. And think about the last thing you tried to learn. Something with technology, for example. You get something down and then you got to add in something else and you're like, oh, now I can't remember what I had thought that I got down. So that's perfectly normal. And that doesn't mean they're not still making progress. That is part of progress. Also, I wanted to say that when we are looking for progress, I think sometimes we start noticing the progress later than we should. So, for example, when your toddler learned to walk, we think the first step in learning to walk is like when they stand up on your lap holding your hands. But that's not the first step to learning to walk. The first step is actually like when they can hold up their head, and then they roll over and then sit up and then stand up, and then they hold on to the couch while they're walking along the couch. And then, so every little step. But it really started with when they could hold up their head. But we don't give credit for all of that progress in the past. Like, go back to the noun example. If your child's learning nouns, then they have already recognized letter sounds, learned how to put letter sounds together. They've learned how to read before you're going to teach them nouns. And so that's part of the progress. And I think we don't recognize that. So I feel like we need to start stepping back a little bit, slow down, and look and see everything it took for our child to get to the point where they can learn nouns and verbs or whatever, or learn some math concept. That progress started a long, long time ago. And I think sometimes we get impatient for them to learn this year. They have to learn fractions. And like they're just starting. They have no idea what fractions even are. Well, maybe that's true that if you say fraction to them that they don't have any idea. But the progress on learning fractions started a long time ago with all the foundational stuff. So they're just on the same road continuing. Sometimes we want them to jog down the road, and sometimes they can't. And we need to just walk with them, next to them, down the road at whatever speed they need, because we actually can't force their brain to learn faster anyway, like no matter what we do. All we can do is support. But if you're having a hard time and you want to see progress, like you want to measure it a little bit, there are things you can do. You can set small, specific goals, like be able to recognize a noun on their own without help. Like that's the goal for nouns. So you start where they are. You explain it in all kinds of different ways. You show it, you demonstrate it, you play games about it, all kinds of things. And then you keep going. And if the goal is, I want them to get to the place where they recognize a noun without me telling them, you can try to put a deadline on that, but it's not usually the best idea. You just keep going until they get there. If you want to put a loose time frame on it for your planning journal, fine, but just know that planning journal can't control how fast their brains can actually learn it and understand it. Progress is defined as advancing, moving forward. I read the definition in the dictionary and it said nothing about any deadlines or timelines. I actually would not make a goal of learning to recognize nouns without my help. The goal, I would say, is something that you can actually act on. So like that's the outcome that you want. That's where you want them to end up, to recognize nouns by themselves. But the goal that you can control is how you work on it, how many times a week you work on it, what games you play about it, or whatever. That a goal to me should be what you can actually do, what's under your control. It's not really under your control how fast their brains can learn it. So I've never liked goals that I couldn't actually control. If you're going to have a goal, because that's just going to be disappointment all the time when you can't control the goal itself. So I would say make goals that are action-based and not results-based. You know how we don't want our kids to come across a new concept and get frustrated immediately and think they can't do it and think there's something wrong. Well, we need to do the same thing. When we introduce a new concept to them, we need to be not thinking in our heads, oh, they're never going to get this. They can't understand, they're so dumb. I mean, we think the same things sometimes about them that we don't want them thinking about themselves. And that energy can kind of show. So it would be really a lot better to have your energy coming from thoughts like, of course you can learn this and we're going to work on it until you do, and not be feeling like, oh, they're never going to get it. It's just not a good thought to have. Okay. Thanks for listening.